Welcome, everyone, to techdaily.ai. I'm your host, David, and joining me today is our expert guest, Sophia. Before we begin, you can sponsor this podcast for just $25. Your message will be featured across major platforms like Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and more. If you're interested, visit techdaily.ai to get started today.
It is so great to be here. I am super excited to get into this one.
Me too. Because, well, today we are looking at something that feels almost like the death of a philosophy in the tech industry.
Yeah, a very stubborn philosophy.
Exactly. I mean, for nearly a decade, the operating system that runs, the vast majority of the world's desktop computers has operated under this incredibly aggressive paradigm.
Right, the whole we know what your machine needs better than you do mindset.
And it will enforce those needs no matter what you happen to be doing at the time.
Yeah.
Like if you, the listener, have ever been rendering a massive video file or maybe compiling code, or you're just, 10 seconds away from jumping onto a crucial client call.
Oh, we have all been there.
Right. And the system historically has zero qualms about freezing your screen, throwing up that little spinning circle, and totally locking you out to apply patches.
It's the absolute worst timing, always.
It really is. But the information we're exploring today points to a massive, just fundamental architectural pivot. Microsoft is actively engineering this transition away from those forced, highly disruptive interruptions.
Yeah, they're moving towards an era of genuine user control.
Which is wild. They're internally calling it this concept of calmer computing.
And it really is a profound architectural shift, because for years, the prevailing design logic has just been entirely paternalistic.
Paternalistic is a great word for it.
Well, the assumption was always that if the operating system didn't forcefully maintain itself, the entire digital ecosystem would basically just collapse under the weight of unpatched vulnerabilities.
Sure. Which makes sense on paper, I guess.
Right, but that aggressive posture turned the foundational layer of our daily workflows into a source of constant anxiety. So moving from an environment where your computer essentially holds your productivity hostage to one where it actually waits for your authorization, that requires unwinding years of established code and, honestly, corporate mindset.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to fully appreciate the mechanics of the new solution, I feel like we have to understand the specific engineering choices that made the problem so unbearable in the first place.
Oh, absolutely.
And this all traces back to the rollout of this concept called Windows as a Service.
Right, the big shift.
Yeah, because historically you bought an OS, you installed it, and maybe, once a quarter you get a service pack.
If that.
Right. But with the current iteration, Windows 11, the OS is basically treated like a web application. It's just continuously evolving.
Which is a double-edged sword.
Exactly. The obvious advantage is constant feature improvement and rapid security patching. But the fundamental flaw is that an operating system is not a web app. It's the floorboards of your digital house.
That's a perfect way to put it. Because continuous delivery models are fantastic for cloud software, right? Where updates happen quietly on a remote server somewhere.
Nobody notices.
Exactly. But when that software runs locally, and it acts as the literal interface between your hardware and your applications, well, continuous delivery inevitably means continuous disruption.
Yeah, and the baseline cadence for Windows 11 right now is, updating at least twice a month?
At least, but that is just the best case scenario.
Oh, right, because of the hardware ecosystem?
Yeah, it's so fragmented. You have millions of different motherboard, processor, and peripheral combinations out there, so updates inevitably trigger conflicts.
And when those conflicts break core functionalities, the developers have to push out out-of-band updates to patch the patches.
Exactly. So suddenly, that twice-a-month baseline accelerates to 3 or 4 disruptive update cycles in a single month.
It's exhausting. I mean, it's like, okay, imagine hiring a contractor to renovate your kitchen, but instead of actually finishing the job, they just permanently move into your house.
I love that analogy.
And every Tuesday, while you are actively trying to cook dinner, they just rip out the plumbing to install slightly more efficient pipes.
Just right in the middle of dinner.
Right. And sure, the water pressure is technically better, but you are standing there covered in flour, totally unable to use your own sink.
Yeah, and right now, the tools you have to actually manage that contractor are incredibly restrictive.
So restrictive. If you navigate through your system menus today, like you go to Settings, then Windows Update, and then into More Options, the absolute best you get is this tiny drop-down menu that lets you pause updates for, 1 to 5 weeks?
Yeah, 5 weeks is the absolute ceiling for a standard home user.
And here's the massive double standard that has always bothered me. Why is there such an extreme disparity based on the version of the OS you bought?
Ah, the pro versus home debate.
Yes, because if you are a home user, you get 5 weeks. But if you are a pro or an enterprise user, you've historically been able to leverage these tools to defer the exact same updates for several months or even a full year. Like, what is the mechanical justification for that massive gap?
Well, what's fascinating here is the intersection of network architecture and behavioral psychology.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, the disparity isn't just Microsoft, punishing home users for fun. It actually stems from how enterprise environments function in the real world.
Okay.
In a corporate setting, you have an IT department utilizing something called group policy. And group policy allows a central administrator to dictate exact rules across a massive fleet of machines.
Right, so thousands of computers all at once.
Exactly. So developers give enterprise users the ability to defer updates for a year because they know a professional IT admin actually needs that time. They need to test the new patches in a sandbox environment to ensure they don't break mission-critical company software before deploying them.
Ah, so they trust the IT admin.
Exactly, they trust the administrative hierarchy. But for the everyday home user, the telemetry data historically showed that if you give people the option to indefinitely delay maintenance, they will simply never do it.
Yeah, I am definitely guilty of that.
Right. Most people are. So the system engineers operated under the assumption that without forced compliance, the average personal computer would just become this massive, unpatched liability.
But here's where it gets really interesting, because the preview builds that are currently being tested show that this entire era of forced compliance is being dismantled.
Yes, finally.
There's this feature spotted recently by a known tracker who goes by Phantom on X, which, by the way, has since been verified as functional engineering, not just some PR mock-up.
Right, it's real code.
And it completely overhauls that restrictive 5-week dropdown. They have basically introduced a calendar flyout right on the update settings page.
And the implementation is just wonderfully direct. Rather than hiding behind a generic, pause for 1 week text prompt, the interface actually presents a functional calendar.
Wow, just a normal calendar.
Yeah. You click the icon, navigate to a specific month, and select a precise date, say April 15th.
Okay.
The moment you confirm that date, all the telemetry and background polling for updates are completely silenced until April 15th.
So no more background chatter at all.
None. The system stops aggressively querying the servers, giving you total, uninterrupted bandwidth and system resources until that specific boundary you defined is reached.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate here, because I look at this and I really have to ask, is this just a cosmetic band-aid?
What do you mean?
Well, changing a drop-down to a visual calendar is a nice UI tweak, sure. But if the underlying update engine remains fundamentally aggressive, does a pretty calendar actually solve the core frustration?
That's a fair point.
Because look, the current documentation around this preview build shows that the moment you click resume updates, it immediately wipes your deferral setting and aggressively triggers a check for new software right then and there.
It does, yeah.
Plus, the upper limit for this calendar pause is speculated to be capped at exactly 1 year, which basically brings it into parity with the current group policy limit.
Right.
So if I buy a piece of hardware, why shouldn't I be able to pause updates indefinitely? Why is the OS still dictating a 1-year hard cap on hardware that I physically own?
Well, this raises a really important question about the reality of modern network security versus individual hardware rights.
Right.
It is incredibly tempting to say, hey, I own the laptop, I dictate the code. But you do not operate that laptop in a vacuum. You operate it on a highly interconnected global network.
Okay, true.
So the 1-year limit is a necessary architectural compromise. In today's threat landscape, an operating system that remains unpatched for over 12 months is essentially guaranteed to be compromised.
Just from being online?
Yes, by automated scripts that are just constantly scanning the web for vulnerabilities. If you are allowed to disable security updates forever, your machine will almost certainly be infected and hijacked to participate in a botnet.
A botnet.
That's right. A massive network of compromised computers used to launch huge DDoS attacks or, distribute ransomware.
Wow.
At that point, your decision to not update isn't just affecting your hardware. Your machine is actively harming the wider network. So a 1-year cap gives you more than enough time to finish a massive video render or complete a university semester or lock down your system for a major corporate project while ensuring your device doesn't eventually become a silent weapon for bad actors.
Okay, I hear the botnet argument, and I definitely understand the network liability side of things. But as a user, it still feels a little bit like a lease agreement rather than true ownership.
Yeah, I get that feeling, yeah.
That said, I concede that a defined 365-day boundary is a monumental upgrade over a forced 5-week cycle.
Absolutely.
But giving us a calendar to schedule the disruption doesn't change the nature of the disruption itself. Like, if April 15th rolls around and the update still takes my machine offline for 45 minutes, we haven't actually achieved calm computing. We've just scheduled the chaos.
And that is exactly why the calendar flyout is not an isolated UI update.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it is merely the user-facing component of a much deeper architectural overhaul. To actually achieve a calm environment, the developers are overhauling the installation mechanics themselves.
Okay, so changing how it installs, not just when.
Precisely. The goal is to drastically reduce the offline time required to apply these massive cumulative updates.
So what does this all mean for the actual code execution? Like, how do you take an update that usually takes an hour and compress it?
Well, it requires shifting how the operating system handles data staging.
Staging.
Yeah, so historically, Windows downloads the payload, waits for you to restart, and then does all the heavy lifting.
Right, the dreaded blue screen phase where you just watch the percentage slowly tick up.
Exactly. It does the unpacking, verifying, and replacing of system files while you are completely locked out. That is the offline phase.
Right.
What the engineering teams are doing now is aggressively shifting the bulk of that workload into the online phase.
Interesting.
So the system will silently unpack and stage all the new files in the background while you are actively using the computer. And it utilizes low priority threads so it doesn't impact your current application's performance.
So I won't feel my computer lagging while it's doing this.
That's the goal. By the time you finally agree to restart, the machine merely has to swap the pointers to the new files, rather than doing the entire installation process from scratch. It dramatically minimizes the time the machine is actually unusable.
That makes perfect sense. Do the heavy lifting while the user's working, not while they are waiting.
Exact.
But even if the core OS updates seamlessly, we still have the total wildcard of third-party hardware.
Oh boy, yeah.
The new policies indicate that Microsoft is finally giving users much tighter, explicit control over third-party drivers. And I mean, anyone who has ever tried to record audio or play a graphics-intensive game knows the sheer agony of an OEM driver silently updating in the background and just crashing the whole stack.
It's infuriating. And the driver issue is incredibly complex because of how operating systems handle hardware privileges.
How so?
So third-party drivers like the software controlling your GPU or your audio interface operate at what is often called the kernel level or ring zero.
Wait, ring zero? That sounds intense.
It is. They have the absolute highest level of access to the system's memory and hardware. They do not run in isolated user mode sandboxes like your web browser does.
Oh.
Therefore, when an aggressive update policy forces a kernel-level driver to change state or restart while you are actively utilizing that peripheral, the OS cannot protect you.
Because it's too deep in the system.
Exactly. It causes a catastrophic system fault, which usually results in a complete system freeze or a blue screen of death.
The worst.
Yeah. So by wrestling the deployment control of those specific third-party updates away from automated triggers and placing it manually in the hands of the user, the operating system is essentially acting as a gatekeeper.
That's huge.
It prevents external hardware manufacturers from prioritizing their own software delivery over your system's day-to-day stability.
Honestly, it is about time. Handing over kernel-level access to an automated update schedule is just a recipe for disaster.
Definitely.
But there is one final piece of this engineering puzzle that I think is arguably the most telling about this new philosophy.
Oh, the restart rule.
Yes. The development roadmap shows they are implementing a hard, system-wide rule regarding restarts. PCs will no longer automatically reboot more than once during an update cycle, even if the user leaves every single setting on default.
Which is incredible.
Right. No more gonna make a cup of coffee, coming back and realizing your machine restarted 3 different times, completely permanently losing your clipboard data, and wiping out your workspace just because it was applying some fragmented string of patches.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, enforcing a strict single reboot policy is actually a monumental technical achievement.
Really? It sounds so simple on the surface.
It sounds simple, but under the hood, the reason multiple reboots occur is due to dependency chains.
Okay, explain that.
Often a servicing stack update, which is basically an update that updates the updater itself.
Very meta.
Highly meta. But that stack update needs to be fully installed and rebooted before the actual cumulative security patch can even begin to apply.
Ah, I see.
So, to eliminate multiple reboots, Microsoft has to completely restructure how they compile and sequence their code drops. They have to consolidate those dependency chains so everything applies simultaneously in a single transition.
That sounds like a lot of work on their end.
It is, and this demonstrates that they are no longer prioritizing developer convenience. They are finally prioritizing the user's cognitive load.
It is a total reversal of the move fast and break things era.
Yeah.
I mean, for a decade, the priority was code deployment velocity. The only metric of success was how fast they could push a patch to a billion devices.
Exactly.
But these new policies, the calendar UI, the background staging for faster installs, the manual control over kernel-level drivers, and the single reboot mandate, they all indicate a systemic realization that a user's attention is a finite, highly valuable resource.
And that is the core takeaway here. A machine with impenetrable security is fundamentally useless if it actively prevents the operator from actually executing their tasks.
Perfectly said.
The implementation of user-defined boundaries resolves a paradox that has just plagued desktop computing for years. It proves that you can architect a highly secure, continuously delivered software service without treating the user as an obstacle to be bypassed.
It's incredibly satisfying to see this shift. We've traced the journey of how a system designed with the best of intentions, keeping everyone's data secure with rapid patching, evolved into this overbearing interruptive force.
Yeah, quite the journey.
We examined the mechanics of why home users were historically locked into rigid 5-week constraints while enterprise admins held the keys. And we explored the actual underlying architecture that is making this new era of calm computing possible.
Because it's not just a calendar button.
Right. It is background file staging, reorganized code dependencies, and kernel-level gatekeeping.
And ultimately, it places the responsibility and the freedom precisely where it belongs,
Right,
with the individual operating the machine.
So I want to pose a question to you, the person listening right now. Think about how this structural change is going to impact your daily workflow. When this ships, how are you going to leverage this newfound agency?
It's a great question.
Will you lock down your machine's update cycle right before a major presentation or a final exam? Will you designate a specific self-chosen maintenance window, maybe the last Friday of every month, just to ensure your tools work exactly when you need them to?
Setting your own terms.
Exactly. The dynamic is finally shifting. Your computer is returning to being a tool that waits for your command, rather than a manager that dictates your schedule.
Such a refreshing change.
But this evolution in desktop computing leaves us with a much broader and perhaps more provocative concept to consider. We spent today dissecting how the architects behind our most fundamental operating systems have finally realized that aggressively demanding our attention is a design failure. They're investing massive engineering resources to learn how to step out of the way and respect our focus. So, what other intrusive technology in our daily lives desperately needs to undergo this exact same architectural pivot?
That's a good point.
Look around your home or your office. What smart appliance, what mobile application, or what digital service is still operating under the outdated assumption that its notifications, its updates, and its demands are more important than your time?
Probably a lot of them.
And more importantly, when will we as users demand that they too adopt this philosophy of architectural calmness? It is definitely something to ponder the next time a supposedly smart device rips you away from your deep focus. Thank you so much for joining us today, and as always, keep asking questions and stay curious.